We're so close.
I see. Meeting is now streaming.
Setting up. Zoom to YouTube. Done. Okay, we should be live.
All right. Okay. So before we open the meeting, we need to have an election for the chair and I think also for the vice chair, even if I am not nominated for chair, just to be clean by the bylaws, it isn't clear. So I think we should just go ahead and do both regardless. So we will start with the election for the chair, if there are any nominations. And then once we have those two out of the way, then the new chair will open up the meeting formally. So do we have any nominations for somebody to serve as chair of the Planning Commission since Abby has stepped down to join the staff?
I nominate Emily Campbell.
Second it.
Here.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, so since we have one nomination, we're going to do these by voice vote. If everyone is comfortable with that. If anyone is not comfortable with that, you're welcome to speak up. And we have an alternative in place. Okay, so
just quickly, was that Brian who seconded that nomination?
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to popcorn around for yes votes or no votes or abstention votes for this vote. So Abby, you are, or Abby, Rachel, you are first to my right.
I vote yes.
Okay, Kevin?
Yes.
Okay, Garish?
Yes.
Okay, Brian?
Yes.
And Bob, OB?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. All right, so now we are going to vote for our new co-chair. And I believe I can still make a nomination as chair, but I will see if anyone else has any nominations first. Garish.
I would like to nominate Kevin Walker.
All right. I second. So we'll do a quick vote. Rachel, or I'm sorry, are there any additional nominations before we do a vote for Kevin?
And I do want to say, if someone else really wants to be vice chair, I'm happy to step aside and let them do it. So don't, if you have secret ambitions of being vice chair, please speak up and I won't hold it against you.
Is Garish timing out? Is that or you just have to, this part of the formality?
I'm aging out. I'm just, I think it's time for some new blood, and I'm happy that we had Emily and Abby for at least a part of a term. And I think having some new faces at leading the Planning Commission is a good idea, so we don't get too stagnant. And so I'm happy with Kevin or anybody else that would like to be vice chair being vice chair.
All right. Okay. So with that, we'll just go through a voice vote as well for Kevin to be nominated or to be elected as vice chair. So Rachel.
Yes.
Garish.
Yep.
Brian. Great. Bob.
Yes.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Bob. I vote yes. And Kevin, I'll let you get the last word.
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay. So we have now elected a new chair and a new vice chair. And I'm pulling up the minutes, which have slipped into the background of my windows. With that, at 4:07 p.m., I am going to call our regular meeting to order. So do we have anybody in the waiting room right now, Mila or Abby, or?
No.
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
And Emily, I just wanted to mention, I think that it would go in this regular meeting before you start. The next meeting is scheduled for Memorial Day. So we'll need to decide what we want to do about that.
Let's bring that up if we have time between the regular meeting and when we launch into public hearings at 5 o'clock. And if not, we'll bring it up at the end for future discussion.
Bailey, it might help if you knew kind of how, if you had an idea of how much business would be coming for the planning commission for that date. And so maybe when we get to that point, you can kind of look at what's kind of in the queue.
Mm-hmm. I do. I have that information. So we can talk about that when it's time.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So for anybody who is watching on YouTube, this is the time where we would invite citizens to be heard to speak to the Planning Commission on any items that are not on the agenda for this evening. And since we are holding off on our public hearing until 5 p.m., I probably will also invite citizens to be heard at 5 p.m. just in case anybody joins then, just because of the sort of awkwardness of digital communication. But if you are watching on YouTube, there's about a 30-second delay. And if you would like to join with the Zoom details that are posted to the public agenda, then you can do so now. We'll let you in from the waiting room and you will be able to speak to the Planning Commission. So I'm just going to give that just a moment to make sure nobody else joins, and then we'll move forward. And Abby and Mila, I can't see if people are in the waiting room. So if you wouldn't mind just doing one quick check to make sure nobody is waiting, and then we'll move on.
Sorry, I had a dog issue.
Okay.
Nobody is waiting.
Okay, awesome. So next, ex parte communications. Do any planning commissioners have any ex parte discussions for the items on today's agenda to bring up? All right, great. Okay, so we have 2 minutes to review. Girish, I know you had a comment on at least one of them, and I want to make sure that that was addressed in the packet. But let's start with the meeting minutes from April 7th. Does anyone have any additional comments or concerns about the meetings that are in the agenda packet from the 7th? April, am I looking at this wrong? I see April 7th and I see April 27th, but the meetings are for the 13th. Did I look at that wrong?
No, I think the 13th was the right date.
Okay, I'm reading it off the agenda. So the 13th
Yeah, that was
and the
a typo.
27th. Okay, cool. So we'll start with the minutes from the April 13th meeting. Girish, was it, these are the ones from the 27th that you had the questions that came up when we were just initially reviewing them?
Say that again, Emily. I'm kind of missed that.
You had raised a concern to staff related to the minutes that the draft minutes that were presented for us to review before the agenda was put together. Was that from the April 13th minutes or the April 27th minutes, and were they addressed?
I think it was the April 13th, and the question came up that it wasn't included in our packet, even though we had responded informally, but I believe it was just postponed. The vote on it was postponed until tonight.
Okay. Great. So for April 13th, are there any other questions or concerns? All right. Kevin?
I move that we approve the April 13th minutes.
I'll second that. However, I think in the future, rather than, like if you look at page 1 of 3, March 23rd, 2030, page 32 of packet clarified that this meeting was heard virtually, remove all underlining throughout, fix FEMA. Those were comments that we had, and I don't think they really belong to the minutes themselves. So if in the future, I mean, I think it probably makes sense, but it would probably make more sense if the minutes reflected the meeting as corrected rather than the suggestions on what we wanted to correct.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that since the draft minutes wouldn't be public. So those addendums for the edits might be confusing to the public and certainly not relevant to public comment or concern. Kevin?
I also had some general comments about the minutes, but maybe we could, after we approve these 2 minutes, we could just have some general discussion about minutes in the future.
Great. I think that sounds great. All right, for April 13th, any other questions, comments, concerns? Otherwise, I'll call for the vote. Bob? I see you off mute.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll call for a vote. So Bob, now that you're off mute, are you voting yes for the April?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Kevin? Okay, yes.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
You're fine. Garish?
Yes?
Brian?
Yes to approve.
Okay, and Rachel?
Yes,
All right, and I vote yes. So the meeting minutes from April 13th are approved. And now on to the meeting minutes from April 27th.
I make a motion that they be approved.
Second.
Any additional comment?
I was wondering, maybe for practice, we could, and to speed things up, we could try just raising our hands on the video for the vote, for non-controversial votes like this.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I don't know
Bob?
how many of us you can see at one time on your Zoom, but
I can see everyone. I'm just sensitive to the fact that Bob is calling in. And I don't necessarily mean to make him the only person who comes off mute. So Bob, are you comfortable with that? If we do a show of hands?
That's just fine. And I'll chime in by voice.
Okay, lovely. So,
Emily, if you are going to do that, I think that's fine, but as long as you can read out the names of those that are voting aye or nay so that the audio recording also reflects complete information, that would be great.
yes, absolutely. I'll do that.
And I think over time, as we get more familiar with using Zoom, we will be able to give verbals. And I don't know if it makes that much difference if we raise our hand or verbally vote.
Well, I think raising a hand would at least be helpful just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. But I think that's a great suggestion, certainly for the non-controversial votes. So let's go ahead and do that. So are there any additional comments for these minutes? Otherwise, I'm going to call for a vote. All right, all in favor
Well,
of
Emily,
Yes,
I
Jillian.
was waiting for commission members to make comments, but I do have a couple of comments. May I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I did notice that the first set of minutes had me as attending. The second set does not, and I do believe I was there as the council liaison. And then on page, oh dear, well, it's page 10 of the packet. It meant the bolded letters are Willow Springs Overnight Accommodations Overlay. And I don't know how it was listed. That's probably how it was listed in the agenda, but since we currently have 3 different types of overlay, we might want to designate that particular overlay that you talked about was for campgrounds. And the last comment I have is on page 14, council report, where it talks about it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down. The city would like to put an RAP tax on the ballot, and then it says the county must pass a resolution. And I would just add to that, because I do think I mentioned this, that we did pass that resolution, or maybe I should have checked that. I should have checked my facts before I spoke up. That might not be true. We may not have done that at that point. So you may want to ignore that one. That's all I have.
I noticed that Mila dropped offline. So Abby, did you capture Jalen's comments that She was attending on the April 7th meeting, even though that's not reflected in the minutes. And on page 10, to designate that we are specifically referring to the overnight accommodations overlay, so that that's clear for future readers.
Okay, this is Abby. I can definitely make those updates. And I actually just got a call from Mila. I think this storm, her internet just went out. And so
Oh,
she's
no.
try, it seems like everyone else's internet is still working fine, but she's gonna try to get back on, or she and I will make a plan. But so I'll include those notes, those minute updates in the notes and make sure that the minutes are updated accordingly.
Okay. And here's to holding that the power grid stays with us. Garish.
Well, since we got a little bit of time here, for some reason, page 3 of 3 is the last numbered page in my packet. Does anybody have an explanation of why that would be? And should I try to file it and save it as a different type of document or something? Or you could help me out. I think it would make me find places that we were talking about in the packet easier.
I think that's specific to how those meeting minutes were exported, because it does appear just to be those meeting minutes. So I'm using Adobe Acrobat, which shows the page numbers on the left-hand side digitally, which is, I imagine, Jalen, how you are referencing the page numbers as well.
Thank you. I see that. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no further comments, so staff is going to make those adjustments, Jalen, and I assume depending on whether or not that resolution was passed, we can also just get that information to staff so that it can be updated in the minutes. So if there are no other concerns, we can vote on the April 27th minutes and hope that Mila can rejoin us. Okay. So all in favor of adopting the April 27th meeting minutes, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And Bob says aye.
Bob says aye, Rachel says aye, Emily, Brian, Garish, and Kevin all say aye, unanimous. Thank you, everyone. All right. So we have a discussion item on the general plan, but Mila is not here. So Abby, I'm going to turn back to you and ask you how you want to handle this. I mean, I know you were on the call where Kevin. Sorry,
Yeah,
Kevin has. You wanted to talk about the meeting minutes, so I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess my comment about the minutes in general, this is following up on a suggestion Jalen made a few times back, is just an option we should consider is having very minimal minutes, which does not try to capture any conversation, just records motions that were made, and how the votes turned out and things like that, and perhaps also just gives time so for people who want the details of an item, that'll help them go quickly to the audio or video and hear the actual discussion. Because I think if one really wants to understand the meeting, you're going to want to listen to the audio anyway. And if we do try to transcribe what people are saying, that there are all these issues about whether the note taker got it right and captured all the nuances, et cetera. So I just wanted to throw that idea out there again, and just see if that's what's something we want to do or not.
Yes, I remember that conversation coming up before the April 27th minutes as well. So I would be in favor of that. Garish, I didn't mean to speak over you.
Well, I think even though there's an audio available, that the minutes trying to capture about the detail that these two last minutes that we approved is important. If we ever went to court, they're going to want to see all the records, and I'm not sure that an audio file fits the records information requirements of the state. So if we were going to make a change, I would suggest that we get counsel advice on that first before we make a change.
I would agree with, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rachel. I'll talk next.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. But another thing from my brief time doing 3 of the minutes, it was, I thought it was just almost a little too, what's the term? Too much up to the discretion of the note taker to like paraphrase things. So I think there's some huge advantages to just, recording the time and then referring people to the audio versus paraphrasing. I just think we need to make it very clear, the format, because that was another issue I noticed in reviewing old minutes, is even the format was different for each set of minutes. So, just having real clear guidelines, and then figuring out what's required, what level of detail is required.
And I was only going to add that my concern is on decisions where we're supposed to have a rationale for making them, these kind of legal ones, when we make a decision on whether to approve something or not approving minutes, but approving a person's plan or rezoning, we need some rationale. So I want to make sure that rationale gets captured.
Yeah, I wanted to address that point and also the point that Garish made. I do think that an audio recording counts as an official record. I mean, we should ask the county attorney to make sure. But I think the possibility of some kind of court case, I mean, that's, I think, precisely the reason not to have 2 competing versions of the minutes. One, the audio recording, another, some much briefer paraphrase. Because that would allow someone to pick and choose. They would say, look, the written minutes, Rachel said blah, and maybe she didn't quite say that, or someone could say in the written minutes, no one said anything about this issue, even though it is present in the audio. So to me, if the minutes ever become important, it just gets really confusing if we have 2 different versions, one of which is perhaps a little bit incomplete. So.
I seem to remember this suggestion coming up from Jaylyn from what the council had started to do. Jaylyn, am I remembering that correctly? Is the more pared back version of the minutes aligned to audio transcript, how the council is handling minutes today?
We're kind of doing a happy medium. Quinn's predecessor was Chris Baird, and his predecessor took such minimal minutes that you did not really know what went on with the discussion. It was basically, here was the motion, this is how it passed. In my opinion, that's probably too minimal, but the stream of consciousness just leaves so much room for error. And in the case of the council, I think this planning commission is way better, but I feel like in the case of the council, I probably shouldn't say this on public record, but I don't feel like everybody is reviewing them equally. And there are a lot of mistakes that actually get through and nobody says anything. And I feel like I'm the only one that's seeing any mistakes. And if that went to court, we'd be in big trouble. So I've been working with Quinn a little bit on capturing the, like bullet points, some of the stream of consciousness, the really important things, such as the rationale for why a motion was made and why it passed, and but not to put every single sentence pretty much in there. So does that make sense? I think it's really tricky to do minutes because people either in the minutes I've seen and some of the boards I've been on are, way worse. The minutes are 20 pages long and it literally is a stream of consciousness. So I think there's a happy medium where you capture the really important points and the motions and who voted for what and kind of leave out all of the conversational pieces.
If I can make a suggestion, I think if you just had, so this is going to be the format of the minutes, like whether one thing was, okay, is it going to be in chronological order, or are you going to have like future considerations at the bottom, and which isn't necessarily chronological order for the meeting. So have a defined order, and then I would say this, public public discussion, and then like the timestamp for the video, and then the vote and the timestamp for that, and then maybe just like a bullet point, and again, specify, is it going to be bullet points or paragraphs? A couple paragraphs of like, you know, why it was voted, you know, so just the major things like the vote for each agenda item, maybe that's the only thing that has any sort of paraphrasing. I would just be real specific.
Yeah, I think that cuts the middle ground. I think ultimately deferring to staff to align with the council standard is the direction I would be comfortable with. Rachel, I like the suggestion of just making sure we have clear format and ordering, including the votes, and having a bullet point breakdown with timestamps. That feels comfortable to me. And I think finds that middle ground, but ultimately I defer to staff both for on the recommendation of county council, just ensuring that we are handling the Public Meetings Act effectively, and also that we are aligning to the standards that council is setting there. So,
yeah, we have a document going of minutes, you know, guidelines that we've been working on, so we can send that out to the county attorney and make sure that everything is complied with, and then we could send it around to the Planning Commission if you would be interested in taking a look at that to make sure it's what you're thinking, like to see.
I
That'd be
would
great.
interested in seeing that.
Sure, you're on the Planning Commission list.
I would suggest, maybe you missed that bit of the conversation when your computer went down, but that when you ask the attorney, ask her, what is the official record? Is it the minutes or the recording?
I believe we need both.
Yep.
It's audio and minutes.
But if we ended up in court on a decision, a recommendation that we made and that eventually was made by a decision was made by the county council, find out if it makes any difference, you know, if it's only recorded in detail, or if the minutes are, you know, the minutes are kind of skimpy, does that make a difference or not?
Sure.
I had one comment also. Since we're all on our personal computers and phones and things, if by chance we were subpoenaed by a lawyer or whatever, all our devices would be, all the information, our personal devices would be, what's the word I want? Liable for a lawsuit or anything too. So we just got to be careful and be aware of that.
Great point, Brian.
Discoverable, Brian. And Garish, I think that's a really good question. I have heard this, Diana always said that the official record of the minutes was the written record, that the tape didn't matter. The audio, I can't imagine that if things did go to a court that they would completely throw out the audio, but it's a good question to get clarification on.
Great. All right. Well, thank you to staff for offering to send that list to the commission, including to Jalen on that list once you all compile that. Also, just one note, I think you may have missed, Mila. Garish brought up a question about page numbering, and it is inconsistent, and I know some people will print out the minutes. So could we just get a page numbering at the bottom of the digital copy of the minutes when they're sent out? Or sorry, not the minutes, the agenda when it's sent out, so that if we print it, we can still, reference it. Cool.
Packet.
The packet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So with the remaining 30 minutes before we go into public hearing, I want to bring up this discussion item for the general plan. And I'd like to open up this conversation just sort of generally, but I did meet with Abby and with Mila to discuss this ahead of time and sent out the email, which is in your packet following the minutes, as a draft letter to be sent for clarification on the 3 items that at least of these 3 items, which continually come up in agenda items related to largely that 313 191 area is where we've seen this conversation really come up, but this concept of a small area plan applies to elsewhere in the county as well, and also addressing the question of do we need to have eligibility zones for the overnight accommodation overlay, or is the current status of countywide eligibility the direction that council would like us to use in order to assess future applications? So what I'd love to get accomplished in these 30 minutes before the public hearing is, like, one, are we aligned on sending a letter? Two, can we get to kind of an outline of what we might want to say in that letter? Is it this? Is it more than this? Is it something else? And then who would be responsible for drafting that letter? I'm willing to volunteer to help with that, but if somebody else wants to take that on or assist, just to make sure that we settle that as well. And of course, if there's anything else that isn't addressed, or if we don't feel like the letter is the right approach, to just make sure that we're also capturing that. So Kevin, I see you're off mute. So do you have any thoughts or comments, or?
Well, it was an accident that I was off mute, I think, but I do have a comment, which is I'm just wondering if the letter could be phrased in terms of, like, here's what the planning commission, plans to do. We're going to do a small area plan here, and various things. And, but, we want to check with the council to make sure that's something they're willing to entertain, and see if they have other priorities, so that there's somehow a default option. It's rather than asking an open-ended question, to say, here's what we think we ought to do, but we want to check with you before we proceed, roughly. So that way, the council's got a lot of things to read and a lot of decisions to make. And so if it makes it quick and easy for them to say, yeah, sounds good, then that's good.
Yeah, I echo what Kevin's saying. That's my comments when you sent that email out, Emily, basically were, let's make it simple and say, this is what we recommend and we want their concurrence.
Okay. If that's what you're thinking, of the items that were raised in that draft that was sent out in the packet, do those address the issues of question? And then it would just be a matter of trying to find a majority consensus, like a straw poll consensus from the commission, to put that on the table for council to respond to? Or is there a different framing or different set of questions or topics you would want to include?
Well, I think Jaylyn probably has a better idea as to how the council likes to be approached and how to make things meaningful but palatable for them to actually look at. My suggestion, but I'd like Jaylyn's take on it, is my suggestion is to deal with the note at 313. We say that we feel like there's a critical need to come up with a small area plan because we've got these proposals. By the time they get the letter, they may have already voted on one or two of them. So it'll be maybe not as imminent a problem because it would have gone away because they've already voted. But to say that, we feel like because of the interest in the 313 area that, we feel like we need to move ahead there. And also there is still confusion and public concern about not having eligibility areas. And that, at least speaking for myself, I don't know if the whole planning commission feels like this, that eligibility areas for overnight accommodations should be developed, and we would be willing to take a first stab at that.
Okay. Brian, hold on. Brian had a comment, I think. You didn't? Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, so I agree with what Gareth said about the 313 junction, that, we should make sure all the planning commission weighs in, but I think we're all agreed that it's a good time to try to develop a small area plan for that area. For the eligibility zones, I know in the past I was advocating for them, but looking at the final form that the OAO ordinance took, it feels less necessary to me now than it did before. I think in the short term, my feeling is the council isn't in a big hurry to start approving these things for the next 6 or 12 months, and so that eligibility zones are not an urgent issue. I think they'll become an important issue when things start getting approved at a faster rate. And I think there can be some downsides. If we draw an eligibility zone it might give property owners within that zone this expectation that they're likely to get approved if they put an application out there. And I'm not sure that that's the message we intend to send by drawing, some zone polygons. So, I just, even though in the past I've emphasized the importance of eligibility zones, I think given current circumstances, I changed my mind.
But I just have a question then for Kevin. How do you feel? Because one of the main issues was that people in a residential zone now can apply for the, for the OEO zone.
Yeah.
And
So I suppose a more narrow thing is this: they could clarify that most of these O zones, like the one for hotels and condo, are intended for commercial zones, not residential zones.
Can I just chime in about our experience with the HDHO overlay and people's impressions? Because I think this would be similar. What we found is that for the most part, generally the applicants understand already that it's an overlay zone, and it does not mean that your property is already zoned that way. However, we do certainly get some calls from people saying, oh, well, I just found out that my property is allowed to have 10 extra units on it or whatever it is. And it's a very short conversation to tell them that it's an overlay zone and that it's not just a by right definition. And I think it is really helpful, definitely with the HDHO in setting expectations. I think that we get a lot more directed phone calls from people that are considering projects because they know what zone they're eligible for, or if they're not eligible. So I think it is, so far, the way the overlay has gone in terms of public education, I think has been pretty positive overall.
But I think one important difference compared to the HDH zone is I think the council was intending to approve a lot of HDH overlays. And I don't get the impression that they're eager to approve a bunch of new OAO zones, while there's still lots of hotels in the pipeline, et cetera. So my personal opinion is that it might be counterproductive to draw eligibility zones at this time.
Bob, you're off mute, but I can't see you. I just want to make sure you're not intending to chime in here.
I think I'm good. Yeah, my guess is I might like overlay zones, but I don't think the council's gonna like them. That's just my guess.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't seem eager when we, I think, wrote a letter to them and said, hey, what about overlay zones? Which I think we did send probably 5 or 6 months ago, or however long ago it was, and they didn't seem to think that was important at the time. They did, of course, put in the thing of not having more overnight rentals in proportion to permanent housing. That little ratio, I don't know what it is, 1.4 or something, not exceeding that, which was kind of nice. So I don't think they have an appetite for that. I don't know if it hurts to ask.
Okay. Well, let me play back what I'm hearing, and then Jalen, I'd love to save some time to get your take overall, and then also Rachel. Yes.
Oh,
sorry,
sorry, one more comment. Is there some other way to do? I mean, I feel like the consensus at the time was that there will never be another one, at least in the near future, as long as in a residential area. So, I mean, is there like some other way to specify that maybe we don't have OAO zones, but like, no, you can't build in resident, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let's separate the two sort of things on the table in this draft, and just play back what we're hearing and just sort of summarize general sentiment, and then we can figure out how we want to proceed. So as to small area plan, I hear Gareth suggesting that putting a straw man on the table to say, we intend to prioritize a small area plan at 313 and 191 interchange. I want to capture the language you used, to avoid, or Kevin, I'm sorry, you suggested this, and Gareth, you said that there is a critical need for this. So So it's one item to possibly include is to sort of state an intention and to clarify, does this align or is this concern from the council to proceed in that way? And then the second item I raised in this draft is as far as proceeding in the meantime. And I think we may just want to straw poll just to take a position there to say we intend to decline to hear applications until we have a small area plan. You know, that's a bit of a stronger position, and I don't know how the council would react to that, but you know, how do we want to present that, or do we want to keep that as an open-ended question? Then there is this question around the OAO eligibility zones, but let's just put that one aside for a moment and address the small area plan. So question one is there general consensus on the commission that yes, sending a letter to council stating a position on this is how we think we might proceed to get essentially directive against this, or to proceed knowing that council is in agreement? And do we want to consider positioning either a question or taking a position up front on how we plan to proceed with applications related to that area in the meantime? And before taking commissioner comments, Jalen, I just want to invite you to come off of mute and make sure we are not so off base with how this discussion is proceeding that you would suggest a changing lens or change how we might approach this.
Okay, now I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's so hard to predict what the rest of the council's gonna do. My gut feeling is that, I mean, I do know that, well, I think I know that all of the council believes that that area is very important to sort through, the 313, 191 interchange. And so I think that letting council know this is how we would like to proceed, and you know, please let us know if you have different ideas is fine. I would not go so far as to say we're going to decline to hear any applications. I do believe that that would rub a few council members the wrong way and think, well, we should at least give the opportunity to see these things. So that's just I've never asked them that question. That's just my feeling that I think would probably happen.
This is Obi. And I would say basically I agree with Jay Lynn. The one thing I'd say is something, probably in approaching it, I'd say we'd like to review this 313 area as a small area study, and that we're having real difficulty, which I think is the truth, making decisions on what should be there without having some information, some plan in front of us. And I think that's exactly what we've had. We've had kind of split votes because we don't know what the vision is.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree, and I think it would be helpful to say, you know, that the council approved the Handlebar Ranch, the council approved the campground over by the Gemini Bridges intersection across the highway. There are two proposals that are coming to the council presumably soon. Namaste Rock and Mr. Pendleton's proposal. So there's a lot of activity potentially going on there, and we could just document that. It's difficult for us to make recommendations because especially where there's a zone change involved, it's difficult to know how that fits in with the general thinking, even though the general thinking of how to interpret the future land use planning part of the land use plan.
So I agree with Jalen's suggestion to, you know, not talk about, you know, this issue of not entertaining proposals. So I think just saying, focusing on the fact that we want to do a small area plan for this area. It's good to me.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we're starting to find consensus. Rachel and Brian, do either of you on this first question have any comments? The first question
Yeah.
being, sorry, go ahead, Rachel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't want the development proposals to guide the plan for the area. So I want to just pretend that we now, we can use them as like, well, look, this is kind of the stuff that's being proposed. So, we need a plan for this area, but I think it would be better to just say, look, we wanted to start from ground zero. Like, what do we want this area to look like?
And I think it would be fair to the public and the landowners out there to have a plan so they have expectations and a little more defined way to determine their applications.
Okay. So playing this back, I agree. I really like how Jalen framed this to draft a letter saying this is how we would like to proceed. Essentially, can we, what would your feedback be? Raising that there have been difficulty making decisions without having some plan, specific cases where we've had split votes. So affirming that this continues to cause difficulty in the planning process. And also noting that it would be fair to the public and landowners. So I want to just take a quick straw vote about are we in agreement that it is necessary to draft a letter to council, specifically sharing the fact that we believe this is something that needs to happen and asking for explicit guidance, particularly within a specific timeline. Language to be drafted. So straw poll, show of hands, show of hands for aye, that yes, we agree that a letter should be drafted on this issue. And Bob, I need your verbal
Yes.
straw vote. Okay, so we're all in agreement there. So we've got 10 minutes left to the public hearing. So on the second issue of OAO eligibility zones. So in the draft email, we note these 4 sort of options on how we might consider OAO eligibility zones, including the third option that it's just not a priority, which isn't to say it's not important, but it may not be a priority at this point, which is, Kevin, kind of what I hear you saying. And so it's, there's this, okay, is it a priority countywide, meaning we believe we need to draw smaller, more discrete eligibility zones? Is it a priority, maybe, but not in the near term, versus not a priority at all? Maybe those two are the same thing. And then finally, related to underlying zones. So Kevin, I hear you say, or I've heard a few of us say, can we get clarification at least on residential zones? That seems to be the stickler, right? And maybe there's some confusion over whether this is even something that council will entertain. But I think just giving them a discrete question with 2 to 3 specific options at least can help us put this to rest or determine to prioritize this in the near term. So we already agree that there needs to be some sort of letter, that the letter should address the small area plan at 313 and 191. Any comments about whether or not to include language about OAO eligibility zones and how we might frame that?
This is Obi again, and basically I'd ask the questions. I don't think it hurts. We can be told, we can find out if there is any appetite. My guess there isn't, but it's good to ask the question.
Okay, Brian, I see you.
Yep.
Oh, I think you just put yourself on mute. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, I did. Anyhow, my comment on this is that, Moab's going to come back strong too, when the coronavirus and all this pandemic is done. And so, but right now, between the disposition of the council slowing down the overnight rentals last year and the coronavirus, I don't see a big issue right now, a big urgency to do anything right now. I mean, I think we, like Bob said, we need to ask the question of council and see what they really want us to do.
I, I agree with Brian that it's, there's not an urgency now for various reasons, including the one that he gave. And I also think that drawing these polygons is going to be a time consuming and potentially controversial exercise. And I just don't think we should be spending our time on it before we need to. I'm sure there will come a time when we need to do something like this, but I don't think it's in the next 6 months, and it's probably longer than that. And so I guess the way, when we write to the council and ask the question, I would hope we could frame the question in such a way that we're not encouraging them to tell us to, start doing these eligibility zones right away when we think that's probably a bad idea. So.
Okay,
And
Garish.
oh, sorry, Garish, go ahead.
Oh, okay. My thoughts are it's better to plan when you're not in a crisis. And if we wait for the economy to improve and Moab to start getting crazy again with development proposals, and people see that there's a lot of money to be made if they can build an overnight accommodation in residential zones, that it's going to be kind of chaotic. And we would be better off to, while things are kind of slow, and I'm hoping, I hope things don't stay slow forever, but I'm hoping we can take advantage of this slow period, that now is a good time to do planning for the future, not when we're in a crisis and we've got tons of backlogged proposals coming before us. If nothing else, I would say we could ask the council specifically if we could have a map that shows the entire county except for residential areas as being potentially eligible for OAOs. And for those of you that are new to the Planning Commission, my sense is that the most comment that we got negatively against the overnight accommodations were from people who lived in neighborhoods and they saw their neighborhoods being changed for the worse because people were willy-nilly going out and turning properties into overnight accommodations under the guise of B&Bs, though they didn't serve the B. They did have the B, but not the B. And we did a lot of work on it. And there seemed to be quite a bit of support for continuing a ban on overnight accommodations in residential zones. And then the politics got involved at the state level and some within the county council, and it was dropped. I would like us to write the letter and bring that up somehow to say, we, and I don't know that it'll be all of us, but we feel like addressing the potential for overnight accommodations in residential zones at a minimum ought to be considered.
Okay. Rachel? Oh, you just muted yourself. Yeah.
Whoops.
Good.
Okay, that's the sticking point for me. I'm actually starting to see Kevin's point of view here, like studying human nature, in that I almost don't want to even term it like, I guess I don't want to make it seem like, I want it to make it seem like we're excluding an area, not that we're creating an area where it's permissible. And then we'll just get inundated with applications and we'll get into this difficulty of, being like, well, okay, if I approve you, then I'm going to approve all, so I almost just want to, in the letter, make it clear that kind of what Garish was talking about, that we, make it exclusionary. I don't even know how to word that. It would take some tricky wording, I think, to kind of exemplify that, I don't know. That's my main thing. I think, the residential thing is a real issue for me.
So for the sake of just a quick straw poll, just to gain where we're at, I would put language like this on the table as a sort of bad version. In addition to the things we outlined above, we also would like to recommend that we proceed to draw overnight accommodation eligibility zones not to include underlying residential zones for now, allowing for the time for proper planning related to overnight accommodation zones at some point in the near future. Something to that effect, not exact. So, sorry, Kevin, I see you.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question because I'm feeling a little bit confused. I don't, when people talk about residential areas, I mean, one issue that's come up occasionally is that there's nothing that prevents us from putting like a hotel overlay, in the middle of a residential zone. I think this is extremely unlikely, but technically it could happen. And I think sometimes people have complained about that, and that could be fixed by, just saying that the hotel overlay zone is intended for the commercial zones. But I just don't think that's an important issue. No one's going to try to do that, and the council's not going to approve it. The other thing people could mean is something very specific to bed and breakfasts. Is have we somehow over the last 6 months opened up this pathway for creating a bunch of new bed and breakfasts? And I also don't think that has happened. It was always been, we had an old OAO zone that was just in residential areas for like condos near the golf course. And it was always an option for the council to plunk that down in some area if they wanted to allow more Airbnbs and just regular B&Bs. So, the council can do anything it wants, whenever it wants. And my feeling is that the recent changes with these OAO zones have not changed things very much, and that it would just be kind of a unnecessary waste of our time if we were to wade into that over the next 6 or 12 months.
So it's just about 5 o'clock. Girish, go ahead, last comment.
Just real quick, Kevin, what if we recommended to the council that the AOA or OAO zones that were in existence prior to getting rid of all of them be reinstated?
I think they were never, uninstated, right? You're talking about the areas like, Rim Village and near the golf course.
Yep.
Those are still within an OAO zone. I mean, their status has not changed.
Right, but we say that but now anybody could apply for overnight accommodation anywhere in a residential zone. And if we could somehow limit it to the existing ones, I think would be good.
Okay, but I think it's always been true that people can request a zone change or we could request being included in even the old, 2 years ago, they could have said, we want to be just like Rim Village, please draw one of these OAO polygons around us. So, people can always request zone changes. So I still just feel like we're trying to address a problem that doesn't really exist.
So just to sort of get a case of where we're at, because we're at 5 o'clock. So I think we've taken the straw poll that there's an interest in that first question. On the second, I'm hearing Bob and Brian and Kevin, I heard you say it is worth asking the question, and the question I'm hearing seem to come up is, giving us time to do proper planning in the short term, that we recommend drawing eligibility zones not to include underlying residential zones specific to the concern about bed and breakfast in residential zones. We want to get ahead of the planning process, essentially, right? So it's something we would like to focus on in the next several months, knowing it may not be a problem now, but it gives us the opportunity to provide proper planning before it becomes a potential public issue at the time of reopening or after coronavirus or whatever that time frame is. I don't want to get too caught in the details. Just a quick straw poll on, does that direction fit with what you would like to see included in this letter to council? So show of hands, aye, to include questions specific to whether to include residential zones and overnight accommodation zones, specifically referencing bed and breakfast. So show of aye, or say of aye, Bob, to include that. Girish? Okay. And those who would vote no in this straw poll? Emily, Kevin, Brian, and Rachel and Bob, do you have an opinion one way or the other?
I don't know. I think it can wait a little bit. I guess I don't see it to be super pressing right now. I think my main worry is if there was sort of a flip of the council or the planning commission, we'd go back to the drawing board with residential, but
And I voted no. I was, I guess, muted, but but it's only because I didn't pick out either residential, which you talked a little bit about, or B&B. I just was interested in whether the council had any interest in creating zones. I think they would say no.
Okay.
That'd be my strong guess, but I didn't want to reference anything in particular.
Well, knowing how long council's packets can get, and that we can always write another letter, it sounds like there's consensus on the first item. And we'll, potentially come back to this question on OAO eligibility zones in the future. So before we turn over to public hearing, last question, is anybody chomping at the bit to draft this letter or take a stab at it? Kevin, yes. Is that a volunteer or a question?
Yeah, I would be happy to help draft the letter, maybe, in conjunction with you. I don't want to, I think someone else should look at it.
Great. Awesome. So Kevin, if you want to take sort of a first stab and we can coordinate about, getting that in a Google Doc and then send a draft around to the Planning Commission, sometime in the next week or so, if we could just get to kind of a first round of edits and reaction to bring it up at our next meeting and make sure that everyone's cool with sending it as is, or at least those who want to sign it can, and then we can send that off to council.
I guess another alternative would be, we've got kind of a sense of the council about roughly what they want to say, so we could just, it could be sent before the next meeting.
Yeah, if we can get to consensus over email, I'm fine with that. I think, let's
And I
see
don't
where
think
that
that
first
is
draft
any
gets us.
open meeting issues.
Cool. All right. So any remaining pressing comments on this topic?
The only comment I have is there's, I know that the state made some recent laws in the last couple of years about bed and breakfasts. We need to be, probably have some counsel from the county attorney about some of the new state laws.
Yeah, that's great. It'd be great to just get a summation from her in general. Okay. All right. Well, I think that takes us through normal commission business. We'll come back to future considerations at the end. Mila, are we ready to invite people in from the waiting room and start our public hearing?
Sure. We
Our
have
public-
the applicant and one commenter.
In the waiting room or I don't see them in here.
In the waiting room. I just admitted them. They should be here in a second. There we go.
Great. Wonderful. All right. So hello to our applicant and our commenter, and those who are watching on YouTube. We are opening a public hearing right now. You're welcome to listen in on YouTube. If you would like to make comment, the link to the Zoom meeting is on the top of our agenda on the first page of our packet, including the password to get in. You'll be put into a waiting room, and then Planning Commission staff will let you in, and we will have that opportunity for comment in just a bit. Girish, I see you waving your hand. Yes.
Though it seems like there are only 2 participants from the public, you said you were going to ask for if there were any citizens to be heard. I think it's appropriate to do that.
Thank you for reminding me. So I'm going to close this public hearing for a moment. Just prior to opening this public hearing, because digital communication is a little new to many of us, if you have a comment to be made to the Planning Commission for an issue that is not related to the item in our agenda for this public hearing for the Strawbird PUD, you're welcome to join now, and we can hear your comment. So I'm just going to give this just a moment to see if anybody joins. And it looks like nobody's joining. If you're watching on YouTube and you're having difficulty joining or can't find the meeting ID, it's at the top of our packet. If you do end up joining and do wish to make a comment, please just join in and put something in chat, and we will come back to it. Okay. And there is about a 30-second delay. So, all right. I think that's sufficient. But Garish, thank you for reminding me. I think you're right that that's good to call out on both ends there. So I am going to open the public hearing on the Strawbird PUD. We do have the applicant here, as well as at least one person who wants to make a comment. So ahead of that, we will ask staff to give us their staff report, and then we'll invite the applicant to speak. Then we'll take comments and we will have commission discussion following.
Okay, would you like me to share my screen with the preliminary plat, or does everybody have it in front of them? What do you prefer? I know if I share my screen, then the boxes might go away with the videos, so I want to give you the option.
I would rather look at it myself.
Great. So if you share your screen, Mila, that'd be great. Thank you.
So, oh.
Maybe I wasn't clear, Emily. I would prefer to look at the preliminary plat on my computer myself rather than, because it takes up, if there are other comments and parts of the proposal that I want to look at, then I'm kind of stuck, I think.
Gotcha. Just so you know, when somebody shares their screen, you can double click on the window and it removes it from full screen, just for future knowledge.
Oh.
But so.
Thank you. My objection is removed.
Why
Okay.
don't you go ahead and not share your screen, and then if we do want to bring it up, we'll just ask you.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. Great, thanks.
Okay, so let me get out of that screen. Okay. So this is an application for the parcel at 4057 South Chapman Lane, which is lot 7 of All American Acres. It's 5.02 acres in total, and the existing zone is rural residential. There's currently one single family home on the lot. We've seen a few others of these subdivisions in this previous subdivision. The difference with this one is that the applicant is requesting using the PUD tool, the Planned Unit Development tool, so that they can create 4 0.25 acre lots that will be clustered in the front of the parcel, and then leave one 4.02 acre lot at the back of the parcel, thereby creating more affordable lots in the front portion of that parcel. This is, in staff's opinion, an appropriate use of the PUD tool. This is what it's for. It's not increasing any density, so the applicant is allowed to have 5 1 acre parcels in rural residential, and that we are ending up with 5 parcels. The PUD tool will allow them to have these smaller, more clustered lots to more efficiently use infrastructure and preserve more open space in the back, as well as providing with some more affordable lots. The applicant has worked with the utility providers. The easements are all in place, and they'll be dedicating the right-of-way on Easy Street and complete any half-width improvements necessary. The utilities didn't have any issues with anything, and I don't think there were no remaining items after DRT on this preliminary plat. Currently it's single ownership, and these would all be saleable lots. There are some changes to the setbacks proposed, which you can do with the PUD tool. The front is from 25 feet, it's become 20 feet, or the building height, whichever is greater. The side is slightly smaller at 10 feet instead of 15 feet, and then the rear is still 20 feet. So they're not too different, but they do allow those lots to fit in that front portion of the lot. The applicant is not proposing any affordable housing or open space density bonuses. So it is just the underlying zone allowable density. And they have provided all the appropriate supporting materials and master plan and everything else. I think that's it from the staff perspective.
Okay. Are there any questions specifically for the staff regarding the staff report before we take comment from the applicant? Garish, I see you.
Thank you.
Yeah, typically, we see the will serve letters as part of the staff report or part of the packet, and I don't see them here. So I have a question. It may have to be addressed by Kaylin, but what is the status of sewerage for the existing trailer home on that parcel?
So I'll just address the first portion of your comment, and then I think that would be a good question for Kalen. I don't know if, Emily, you want to invite him to speak before that, but we have decided to take out the will serve letters from the packet because generally all they say is we will serve this property, and staff make sure to collect all of them, and if there are any missing, we don't present that application to the Planning Commission. If you would like to see the will serve letters at any point, that is perfectly fine. And if commissioners would like to see those in the packet again, that's fine. We were trying to slim down the extra documents that just made the packets really unwieldy. So we decided to have those as a on request, but just be sure that we are certainly not allowing anything to come before the Planning Commission without all the appropriate will serve letters.
Thanks. And Garish, let's hold off on our questions for the applicant, but I think that's a great question to ask. Brian, I see.
I had one. Yeah, I have a question for staff. The remaining 3 acres, if this is approved, is there some kind of a deed restriction on that 3 acres, like in maybe 10 years, if they want to divide the 3 acres? There's some kind of a plat note or something restricting the division of the 3 acres?
No, there isn't, but it wouldn't be allowed because those 5 units on the 5 acres has already taken up all of the density.
Yeah.
So it would be well, what's recorded is the master plan. So the master plan is attached to the original parcel number. So it'll be attached to all of the new parcels as well. So that would come up. That 3 acre or the 4 acres in the back won't end up being just an independent parcel that would be able to be subsequently subdivided.
Okay, I just wanted to restrict because he's using his density up, and so like in 20 years, somebody different might own it, and they say, okay, I got 4 acres and I want to subdivide it.
Right.
So that's my concern.
And that's the purpose of the master plan in this case.
Okay, Kevin.
And also, Madam Chair.
Is that in relation to Brian's question, Garish?
Yes.
Okay.
So my understanding is that parcels can only be subdivided once. Is that correct?
Usually, yes.
What does that mean?
That is the general rule. I think I haven't looked entirely into all of the details of the code, but if you end up with a subdivision and then a platted subdivision, if you have for instance, if you have a minor record survey and you carve off a large chunk and then you end up putting a subdivision on that piece, that would be something that can happen. So, only subdivided once is a little bit confusing, I think. But generally, yes, you can't subdivide one residential lot more than one time.
So a 4 acre residential lot can only be subdivided one time.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure about that? I own some land I think's been subdivided several times. I mean, over the years. So.
I think that's the way things are currently.
So like if there's a 10 acre lot in rural residential and it gets divided into 2 5 acre lots, that's it? They can't continue to carve up the 5 acre lots 10 years from now?
Right, so that's what I was saying. So if you did a minor record survey or something like that and then divided it up, you could divide those subsequent lots again, but you can't have another subdivision after you've subdivided the original. Like if it's a subdivision in a platted subdivision, you can't do it multiple times, but you could plat a new subdivision over those lots that you created out of that 10 acre parcel.
And it has to abide by the zoning, the size of the lot, underlying zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a follow-up to Brian's question, which is something I was wondering about as well. So just to make sure I understood you correctly, because the audio went out a little bit. The mechanism is that this 4 acre lot together with the 4 smaller ones is going to be attached to some master plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if 20 years from now, when there's been 100% turnover in planning staff and the planning commission, and someone says, I want to divide this 4 acre lot, people then would, because of this master plan, they would notice that its density has already been used up.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question was, does that hold true even if we say, okay, now you can do 2 units per acre? You know what I mean? Then what happens?
I
to
mean,
that?
when you change zoning, then it would be subject to the new zoning. So, you know, I mean, a lot of lots in town have been rezoned, and then under the new zones that they're allowed to have those new privileges. But
Okay,
that
so
would be a legal subdivision at that point.
Okay, so if we allowed higher density, then even though that's already been subdivided, then that 3-acre lot could now build according to that higher density, even though it had already been a planned unit development in the past, part of a planned.
Yeah, I don't see why not. They would be entitled to, you know, whatever new zoning rules were applied.
Well, now I'm confused again, because I thought once you had a planned unit development with a plan, that unless you revise the master plan for the PUD, you can't do any further subdivisions.
Well, I think Rachel, well, if I didn't misunderstand, I think she was talking about dwelling units allowed. So if it ended up being 2 per acre, then they would end up being allowed to put 2 on their acres. So if it was 5, so right now they're allowed 5 dwelling units or, you know, lots per 5 acres, because it's 1 per acre. So if that turned into 10, they would be entitled to double that. But that would be true for everybody in the surrounding area as well if the zoning were to change. I mean, that wouldn't just be this PUD, that would be all of the lots in All American Acres, assuming that would change the zone.
But
Except what my question was, that 3-acre piece, then would they be able to put 6 units? You see what I mean? See how you're already having a higher density in that one area. So now could that unit, could that 3 acres have 6 units on it?
So no, because you'd be looking at the whole 5 altogether. So
and you have a master plan recorded. In order to do so, wouldn't you have to come back and revamp the whole
Yes.
PUD master plan?
yes, correct. You would have to redo the entire thing you'd have to have an amendment to the master plan to reflect whatever the new zoning and, you know, allowable lots were.
All right. Any other questions for staff? All right. Then I'd like to invite the applicant to come off mute. And thank you for changing your name. That's a cool feature of Zoom. I didn't realize we can do. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your full name, if you'd like to give a statement on your application, and then if Planning Commission members have any questions for the applicant, we can do that as well.
Thank you. My name is Kalen Jones. My full name is Douglas Kalen Jones, but nobody hardly knows me as that, but that's what you'll see on the plat. And I'll answer Garish's question first because that's an easy one. The existing residence has been hooked up to the Spanish Valley sewer system for at least 2 decades. So the primary goals of the rural residential zone are to accommodate agriculture and single-family residential uses with a 1 dwelling unit per acre base density. And the Strawborough will provide parcels which meets these goals at the base density with a combination of right-sized residential lots and 1 larger lot, which can support agriculture. This current lot 7 of All American Acres, has 15 acre-feet of Ken's Lake water. So it is both irrigated as well as arable. And as staff explained, maximizing the size of 1 lot and keeping it private, well, maybe staff didn't say this, rather than moving some of the area into communal open spaces, as common with PUDs, encourages its owner to take care of it and maximize its agricultural utility, which helps maintain rural character. And then the smaller size of the other 4 lots contribute to at least attainable market rate housing, rather than having more kind of largish, but basically residential lots in the valley. So it's providing some diversity in what's on the market. I realize that you approve zoning overlays independent of other project specifics, which are subject to change, but I'd like to address my intent a little bit. I began this project with the intention of possibly partnering with local affordable housing developers for the smaller lots. Over the last 6 months, I've consulted with Community Rebuilds repeatedly on lot design, utilities, and pricing. And despite some recent COVID-generated uncertainty, it is looking likely that CR may build on at least some of the lots. And I think they will address you later. I proposed generally smaller than code setbacks on the smaller lots to maximize their potential beneficial use, such as ADUs. And the exception to that is where any of the lots abut adjoining properties, in which case the setbacks reflect the project boundary buffer standards. And then I would like to go back to the question that Brian raised, and because it's one I've considered as well. In just proposing that the PUD be at the base density, I'm potentially foregoing additional lots, which I could have at this point. And especially if I do end up partnering with CR and they're deed restricted and affordable, I could potentially maximize the development under the existing land use code. But with that, in order to do that, I would also have to dedicate open space, which I haven't been to one of your meetings in quite a while, but seems like one discussion that's gone on over the last several years is that generic subdivision open space doesn't necessarily meet the intention of preserving rural character. It often is like this network of spaces around lots that in effect creates larger lots, but and it seems like the end result of that is that in a decade or 2 or 3, when the community via the land use code revision decides that additional density is desired, as it has with HDHO, which is basically largely takes the brakes off of density for beneficial use, is that then those subdivisions cannot be reallocated to the community's needs. You're basically stuck with however they were formulated as being the best use in the early 2000s. So as you've discussed, that 4-acre lot could be subdivided, but only if the community as a whole, via this body and the county council, decides that it's time to reconsider how density is allocated, whether it's an expansion of the HDHO, its geographic limits, or via the underlying zone. So sometimes I do find it confusing going back to old plats and trying to figure out like what was the intention then and what was the code at the time. So if you're concerned about that, I did think that it could be addressed via a plat note. The master plan might be sufficient, but I'm open to talking about that more. That's what I've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we turn into commissioner questions, for anybody watching on YouTube, I just want to remind you that if you would like to make comment on this public hearing item, you'll need to join the Zoom meeting, the details of which are at the top of the agenda in the Planning Commission packet. And I'm making this now because there's a small delay between our meeting and the YouTube meeting, and I just want to give you the opportunity to join if you'd like to. So, all right. Are there any questions from commission members for the applicant? Kevin, I see you off mute, so if you have one.
Sure, I just wanted to, it's more a comment than a question. So if I understand you correctly, Kaylin, you're saying part of the benefit for subdividing in this way is if, sometime in the distant future, the community decides it wants more density on Chapman Lane, a 4-acre lot is a lot easier to work with than 5 1-acre lots. And so there will be, so nothing's guaranteed to happen, but the community could decide some point in the future to put additional density there.
Yes, that's my understanding. And with other, I mean, 1 acre lots could potentially be subdivided if they have the sufficient frontage, or it can be finagled into flag lots. It seems like PUDs with open space may be more difficult, both because of the sort of the attachment that the existing owners would have developed to the open space which tends to surround their lots, as well as that open space not really being configurable as buildable lots. But so I wouldn't necessarily consider the 1/4 acre lots, but the 4 acre lot, at such time as the community said, sure, we need more housing, and if it hadn't been developed in a way that precluded that, then that could happen. But it would be at the community's discretion rather than the owners.
Bob, do you have a comment or question, or are you just off mute?
No, just listening, although I unmuted myself just in case.
Okay. Garrett, I see you.
Caitlin, I've got a question. Your narrative talks about the preserving, agriculture in Spanish Valley, et cetera. And you mentioned that you do have Hens Lake water that could be used on this parcel. Do you know what the history is? When was the last time it was actually used for agriculture of some sort, other than perhaps pasture, dry pasture, it seems like? And is the irrigation system operational now? I'm just kind of trying to get an idea of what would change from an agricultural standpoint if the county council approves this or doesn't approve it.
So I lived there for the first 12 years that I was in Moab, and when I moved there, it had an alfalfa field, which I kept up for like 6 years, which used the water, and someone in the neighborhood mowed and baled it. But over time, I became too busy to keep that up. So since then, I've been leasing most of the water to other people on the system who have need of it. And the piping is there and functional to irrigate at scale, but it would just be dependent on the individual. And I could reallocate the water to that lot as needed.
Is there anything in your proposal that would, you anticipate that if the PUD is approved by the county council, that you in fact are going to be doing agriculture again on that remainder, the open space portion of the property? Or is it going to continue, is it likely that it's just going to continue to be what's there, which is open space, but it's kind of like the open space around some of the other developments that isn't much beneficial use to much of anybody?
Mm-hmm. I think it'll remain in its current use. I don't have any intention of farming, and it's relatively undisturbed, so it's sagebrush. So I would say that it's in a little bit better shape than some of the open space in developments, post-development. And the water is going to people who are making beneficial use of it, and that's the limiting factor in the valley. So if I were to apply it on that property, then it would go away from the people that are using it now. And so.
And I also just wanted to remind the Planning Commission that the applicant is not required to have any kind of open space or beneficial use of the open space with this PUD application, because they are not requesting a density bonus for that to be dedicated. This is just the back lot is just another lot.
Thank you.
I've got another question for the applicant. What is the rationale for cutting back the front setbacks?
Just to give a little bit more space for the building envelope. It seems like even though All American Acres was developed as 5-acre lots, many of the properties have been developed with the residences right on the, or what appears to me to be right on the front setback line, and sometimes close to adjacent properties. So the buffering from the street that can be which you might use a large lot for, don't appear to be that taken advantage of. And it also, I am aware that there's a housing crisis here, and ADUs are a prime tool for addressing that, at least in part. Obviously, there's no silver bullet, but making the buildable footprint a little bigger just makes it easier to fit that in addition to garages and other outbuildings that people tend to want.
I didn't quite follow that. So if this project were designed so that the setbacks were as specified in the code, is there I didn't follow how the ADU fit in. It seems like it would give you more space for an ADU if there's room on the lots than less room. So I'm not really following your logic there, Kaylin. Can you help me understand?
In general, the setbacks are less. On where the lots, interior lot lines, where they abut lots within the proposed PUD, they're significantly smaller. The front setback is a little smaller, and then where the development abuts adjacent properties, they're larger because of the project boundary buffer. So
yeah, I understand that. I'm talking specifically about the front setbacks on Easy Street.
Mm-hmm. So by making them a little smaller, it just increases the buildable area, which makes it easier to fit in an ADU and other buildings which require building permits.
Or conversely, the back lot line could be moved further to the north to achieve the same goal?
I'm proposing both, but more so with the back lot line and just a little with the front lot line.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant at this time?
So Kaylin, this is Bob O'Brien. I wasn't quite sure, and I unmuted myself, so I might have missed something, but of course, you could move the line on the 4-acre lot up a little bit and then still have the lots would be slightly bigger. They'd have this buffer area back another 5 feet or whatever it takes. The reason for not doing that is probably to maybe preserve this potential agricultural space, I'm guessing.
It's that, and when I was sketching out possibilities, I drew some larger lots, and the feedback that I got from Community Rebuilds was that they really they thought it was better to minimize the lot size, and so that to minimize the lot cost, so if they were the developer, that they could keep the cost down into the range that their typical homeowner can afford. So I did consider that, but this is where we ended up. So that's what I'm proposing.
All right. Any other questions at this point for the applicant? All right, thank you, Kaylin. And I think we have one person joined to make comment, Kenny Fallon. So Kenny, if you'd like to come off of mute, normally we give about 3 minutes, so I'll set a timer and I'm not too concerned since there's just one person right now.
Okay. Want to start?
Yeah, this is Jessica Manderfield and Kenny. We work for Community Rebuilds. I'm the program director and Kenny is a planner in the office. And we just wanted to kind of come in and speak on behalf of Kaylin and just say that we really we've been working with him since November of last year when he approached us as a possibility of potentially selling us these lots for our homeowners. That's, as you all know, land is hard to come by in Moab, and especially affordable land for our homeowners. And so this seemed like a really great opportunity to be able to potentially build on 4 lots that we could afford with the loans that we can get for our applicants. And Kenny's kind of done a lot of design work, as Kaylin was saying, just in general with the land itself, but then also our homes. We've been doing a big kind of redesign, given that we have the land trust and some other areas where we're going to have a bunch of homes in a row. And so we want to make sure we're giving a little bit of variety to the view as you're driving by. It's not going to be the standard rectangular box that we've been building. We're adding some porches and changing our roof lines and stuff. So you'll have a little added detail to those houses. And I'll let Kenny talk more about that.
That's mostly what I was gonna say. Yeah, we're changing up the houses to where it won't be cookie cutter, and it'll be different and interesting to walk by. Different roof types, porches. Yep, pretty much it.
All right, great, thank you.
Thanks.
So before we close the public hearing, does that raise any additional questions for the applicants that any of the commissioners want to ask Kaylin? All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. So thank you to our applicant and to our commentator for joining us. So open to discussion, questions from staff, and then of course we'll move to a motion. Anything for discussion?
I think this is a good proposal. It makes sense. It's not proposing any additional density over what will be allowed. So it seems to me it should be pretty uncontroversial.
All right.
Emily, we do have 2 people who just joined us in the waiting room. Oh,
okay.
Yeah, okay. I can let them in and see if you want to ask them what they'd like to talk about.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm letting them both in now.
Thanks. All right, so Mark and Stephanie. Oh, connecting to audio. I'll give it a second. Waiting for it.
It looks like Mark might be all set.
See Mark. It's like Stephanie might be having a hard time. All right, well, welcome Mark, and we'll see if Stephanie is able to join us. Mark, we've closed the public hearing, but if you just joined us intending to make comment on this proposal, I'd be happy to reopen the hearing and give you an opportunity to make comment.
That's very sweet of you. I have no comment to make on Kaylin's project. I just am surprised to see a meeting happening since there's no notification on the county's website and no agenda posted either. That's just all I had to. Thanks. Thank you guys. I wish I could see the agenda. I can't seem to find it.
Okay, thank you for your comment. We'll make sure that that is. Thank you, Mark Horowitz. So Mila, would you mind just checking on that in the background? All right.
Sure.
And
it looks like Stephanie's okay now too.
All right. So hi, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us. We did just, I guess I didn't officially, so I'm reopening the hearing. Stephanie, hi. Thanks for joining us. if you would like to make a comment, you're welcome to come off mute and make a comment about this application for the Strawburb development, or if you have a comment about a different issue that's not on the agenda today, if you could just let us know what you wanted to make comment for, or if you're just here to listen. Stephanie, are you able to hear us? It looks like you're on mute. Stephanie, hi, thanks for joining us. If you would like to make a comment, you're welcome to come off mute and make a comment about this application for the Strawburb development, or if you have a comment about a different
Sounds like her YouTube is playing in the background.
agenda today, if you could just let us know what you wanted to make comment for, or if you're just here to listen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear us in real time on the Zoom? You might need to mute your YouTube.
I might what?
Stephanie, are you able to hear You need to turn off your YouTube because there's a delay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Stephanie,
Okay,
did you
thank
have
you.
a, okay, go ahead.
I've been in the waiting room for a while, so I was still in there when the meeting was open. So I'm sorry, I don't know what buttons I pushed, but anyhow, and I missed, oh, something just happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I just have a couple of questions. My name is Stephanie Dahlstrom. I live on Easy Street. And so I'm just down the street from Kaylin's property. And my questions are, I know that is the open space just that 4 acres? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so is that open space just 4 acres, and is that privately owned? Or I don't understand when he's talking about what the open space is and how those 4 houses that are squashed together can use that open space. And my other question is, Kaylin has said that a lot of the other parcels are doing the same thing in the All American Acres, and I'm just wondering what that is. I know that White Horse is there and Ben Birds, and are they part of All American Acres? Because I don't see that density on our street, except for maybe Rhonda's place that has the Busy Bee Farm, but most of the other parcels on Easy Street themselves don't have 5 places on each of those 5 acres. So those are just my 2 basic questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask staff just to give a very quick summation of the 5th fifth property of the 5 that would be proposed with this subdivision, this PUD subdivision. And also, if you wouldn't mind, just give a quick summation of the All American Acres subdivision, just so it's clear for the commentator of what area we're talking about. Mila, do you mind just giving a quick summary there?
Sorry, can you clarify? What do you mean? You want me to summarize the All American Acres subdivision?
So what I hear the comment making is some confusion about the public's, that the 5th larger property would not be public space. It would actually be a real resaleable property. So it would not be designed for use. And then just, she asked a question about the All American Acres. And when we're talking about subdivisions, just a quick, like where that boundary sits, because I think there's some confusion about it.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have the original plat for the All American Acres subdivision up in front of me, so I can't address exactly where those boundaries are, but that original subdivision has a number of 5-acre lots, as far as I know. Many of those have come up for further division recently. A lot of people are turning them into 3 and 4 lots, since they are larger lots right now, and the zoning does allow for a greater density than was previously platted. The back lot in this PUD is not public open space. It is simply a 5-lot subdivision. The 4 front lots are smaller and clustered in a way that would not be allowed using underlying zone. So that's why the applicant has chosen to propose a planned unit development, which allows them to vary the lot sizes and also change the setbacks to promote this kind of clustering to leave some more open space. In this case, when we talk about open space, we're just literally talking about space that is left undeveloped. So this is not public open space. It's just a fifth lot that would be a private saleable lot. The master plan that guides this development will be recorded along with all of these lots. And in that case, in the future, that back lot would not be able to be further subdivided unless the zoning was changed to allow that.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Stephanie?
Yeah, it does. It sounds a little dicey to me that there's a potential for it to, they're saying and they're using the words open space, but yet it's not really going to be open space. And I don't have anything against Kalen. I think he's a wonderful person and all of that, but I just worry about what's happening in our neighborhood. And so I just am speaking that. So I do have some concerns. However, I mean, what he's doing is not asking for a zone change. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there's not much that can be, you know, gone up against. So yes, my questions are answered.
And I just want to clarify that the applicant is not proposing open space. They're just proposing a 5-lot subdivision in which one of those lots is larger than the other 4. That's all.
Right. But you keep saying open space. I've heard that mentioned.
Yeah, I think people are referring to that just as maybe undeveloped space, I think would probably be a better term. I think we've been using open space a little bit too loosely in this conversation in that case.
And that's probably where the confusion lies, because it sort of portrays that there is going to be some open space, but in reality there is not, or could potentially not be, which means that 5-acre lot could be developed way more if the zoning is changed.
Yep.
Thank you for your comment, Stephanie.
Okay,
Ken?
thanks so much. I appreciate you letting me speak.
Thank you.
The comment I was going to make is pretty similar to what Mila said. I think the planning commission is clear that this is not open space in the usual sense that would, like, you know, justify some kind of bonus density or something like that. It's so in that sense, it's not open space, and no one believes that it is. The other comment I was going to make is I just checked the plat map, and I do think that the former 5-acre parcels to the northeast and west of this one have all been subdivided to things significantly smaller than 5 acres, or I guess in the case of the east, it's on the way to that happening. So.
Okay. Before we go into further conversation as a commission, since I reopened the hearing, and normally after public comment, we would give the applicant a chance to speak. Kaylin, I noticed you had turned your video on and kind of off mute there for a moment. So I know this is a little out of order here, but if you do have an additional comment there, I just want to welcome you to come off of mute and make your comment, and then we'll close the hearing and we'll go back into conversation as a planning commission.
I tried to differentiate between formal open space and just undeveloped land in my application in the written material. So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. And I agree that we should be careful about how we talk about it. And just to clarify for Stephanie, perhaps this is a public hearing for an overlay, a PUD overlay, which is technically a zone change, as I understand it, and is discretionary. If I got that wrong, Mila, please say so. Just to Stephanie's point that this is a recommendation to the council, and the council can accept it, do it or not. So if there was a lot of opposition, then now is the time to say so. But
yes,
so just want to make those clarifications.
Yeah, this is, so the underlying zone allows for this density. The legislative aspect is approving the layout.
Great.
Thank you. That's all I had.
All right, thank you. So with that, I am going to close again the public hearing. And Brian, I noticed you came off mute, so just inviting commissioners for discussion on this issue. Oh, you just muted yourself.
Computer. Anyhow, my comment is on the staff report where the last sentence on the summary of request, it says why and preserving more open space. So it's on the staff report, and that's part of the confusion, I think, is that it's not really preserving the open space as most people think open space is.
Yeah, you're right. It is preserving more undevelopable land, not official open space.
Great. Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Garish, I see you.
So I don't know the layout of the whole All-American Acres and what has been developed and what hasn't. That would have been helpful to have to reference so we could put this in perspective. But I know that most of the developed lots on Easy Street have houses that appear to be further back than the setback requirements. And having 4 houses clustered on the corner of Easy Street and Chapman Lane is going to be a little bit out of character for the rest of that street. So I don't know that I'm necessarily too keen on having any reduction in the front setbacks.
And the applicant just put a comment in the chat that the upper right of plat has adjacent lots. Sorry that my head is not finding the terminology, but is this referring to a page in our packet?
So if I may.
Well, I'm just curious, when you say upper right of plat, are you speaking geographically or apologies if you're directing to a page and I'm just not.
Oh, sorry. Well, one of the required parts of the submittal is that the lot layout of adjacent properties is included. And initially I wasn't aware of this. I thought that the surveyor hadn't included it. And he pointed out that if you go to the plat, the actual page that is the plat from Red Desert, and then go to the zoom in on the spot that shows the location, you can see the adjacent subdivision lot lines.
All right, thank you. All right, so we've had some discussion.
What page would that be on in the, is that the preliminary plat, or I'm trying to find?
I can share my screen where I think the applicant is talking about.
That'd be great, thank you.
Can you all see that?
Yes, we can see that now.
I see. This is the vicinity map that he's describing in the upper right corner of the preliminary plat.
And Garish, that's page 31 in my copy of the packet.
Thanks, Kevin.
So you can see some of the previous subdivisions on this map as well. And the Planning Commission has recently in the past few months approved 3 more of these lots to be also subdivided, 2 into 3 parcels and 1 into 4. And one of those applications is coming back shortly with a 4 lot instead of a 3 lot subdivision.
So what is the outline of the All-American Acres? Does it include Lipizzan Jump, Heaven Avenue, Easy Street, and?
It's Heaven Avenue and Easy Street, and I believe just this portion here of Chapman Lane. It does not include Lipizzan Jump.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do any commission members want to make a motion?
I will make a motion.
Okay.
And do we have one in the packet? No, I've really lost place on where I am.
Page 16, Garish.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I make a motion. I move to send a favorable recommendation to approve the Strawberg PUD and associated master plan for the parcel at 14057 South Chapman Lane, All American Acres Lot 7, with the additional requirement that front setbacks along Easy Street are maintained as prescribed in the land use code.
I second. And also on seconding, he read the address wrong.
4057 South Chapman Lane.
Yes.
457.
Sorry, I'm a little dyslexic too, but that's it.
Thank you. So I guess we'll separate the two potential motions. So this has been moved and seconded. Garish, do you have any comments since you were the one who made the motion?
Yeah, I think it's a great project, and I think this getting a partner like potentially community rebuilds involved, making some environmentally good affordable housing is a really great opportunity. I'm glad Kaylin has taken advantage of it. So that is for my main motion. And if you want me to comment on the additional part of the motion that I guess we're going to take up as separately, I can do that now, or I can wait.
Just to clarify, that's not the thing we're taking up separately. There's also approving, lower down on that page 16, there was a second part. So you should
For the
talk
preliminary plat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. So Garish, just to
Oh.
confirm, yeah, so you're making a motion that follows the text of the first part of the motion that's included in the packet with the addendum to set the setbacks as they would be set under code, correct? Okay, and Brian, did you realize that's what you were seconding? Okay, great, cool. And then we'll address the second piece of the motion in our packet in a moment, just for clarity's sake. So any other comments about Garish's motion? Brian, did you have any additional comments since you seconded? Okay, Bob?
I had just a question. So as I understand it, it's only the setback from Easy Street that he's wanting to change from the way the plat was presented. Is that right?
That's how he worded it, correct? Yes, Garish? Great.
Good.
Yeah, so I guess I have a comment. It's not clear to me. So I think this is like 20 versus 25 foot setback that's being discussed on that line. It seems like, over and over again over the past few years, we've made decisions in favor of, greater density and for the sake of affordability. And this is yet another example of that. So it just seemed, to me, it feels kind of inconsistent to, make the building envelope smaller here and or, make the lots larger and therefore cost a bit more, considering all the HDH proposals we're approving and all that stuff. I don't think that houses 5 feet closer to Easy Street is going to have a huge impact on the neighborhood. I do think that clustering the houses as opposed to making 5 equally sized lots, is probably a net win in terms of, preserving character of the neighborhood. So I don't, I can understand, Garish's impulse to not grant unnecessary favors, but I think in this particular case, I disagree with not granting that request of the developer.
I tend to agree with you, Kevin. I find that, yes, we obviously want to be careful about making choices that seem ad hoc, but in this case, one, given surrounding land use, surrounding developments, and also while I know that that is not specific to the case at hand, given the, the opportunity for potential accessory dwelling units as a potential way to increase the amount of market or potentially slightly below market housing is also compelling. So do you intend to offer a amendment to the motion, or are you just leaving comment?
If I'm convinced that, someone will second it, yeah.
Okay, Garish?
So my concern is that, and I don't know Easy Street that much, that well, but this will probably be the highest density along that street. So people are going to have a tough time kind of accepting that all of a sudden there's going to be all these new little houses, which are great, affordable, but more affordable housing. But if you do go to Easy Street, you'll see that the majority of the developments, the majority of the lots that have houses on them, the houses are set back quite a ways beyond what the setback requirement is. And I think it would be more compatible with the neighborhood if at least the council requires these houses to meet the minimum setback as specified in the code. So it's just a matter of compatibility with the neighborhood.
So Garish, I just took a look at Google Maps and where it shows the building footprints and the neighboring parcels. And I can't get out calipers to see exactly how far back they are, but it seems like even on 5-acre lots, people have chosen to put their house pretty close to the street in that neighborhood. I don't know if it's 25 feet or 30 or 35. I can't tell, but it's not like way back.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Kevin, that they tend to have their houses closer to Easy Street than they do their back lot lines. But most of them are, without getting out the calipers, I can't tell how far what the average distance is, but I think that the average distance is well beyond the minimum required setback from the street.
Bob and Rachel, since your videos aren't on, I just want to make sure that you're not waiting to make comment.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening. My only comment is, I think it makes sense to fit with the character of the place. 20, 25 feet. I don't know. I guess that might be a question for the developer. Like, is this, how will this change? Seems like the main issue is the affordability of the lot. So I don't know which that would change the affordability.
I found some calipers. I'm going to try to measure distance. Digital calipers.
You must be a mathematician, Kevin.
Kevin, if you could share your screen with us as you do that, it would be quite informative.
You want me to try to do that?
I know the area quite well out there, and it looks like Bobby Dominic's home is one of the closer ones, but most of them are back probably 50 to 100 feet off the lot line. And I just concur with Garish on this. It's just 5 feet, really minimal. It's not really that much, but I think it's the actor, the thought of giving an extra 5 feet, and the affordability of the lot, it will not affect the affordability of the lot one bit. The lots, you can build a house on it. I'm a broker, real estate broker, and the affordability of that house, the lot will not be affected.
All right. Any other comment on this first of two motions?
Well, just so that we have a chance to vote on it separately, I will propose an amendment which would strike, the part that Garish added to the main motion. So, grant setbacks as the developer requested.
Okay. Is there a second? Can I second? I can't remember. I second. I second that. Okay, thank you.
Since I get to talk first on the moment, I think some of the points people have made, I do acknowledge that, if the lots instead are made a little bit larger, that's not going to have a huge catastrophic input on cost. So I actually think this is not such a big deal, but I lean slightly toward this way, but I understand other people's point of view on this.
Any other question on the motion, any other discussion on the motion or the amendment to the motion? If not, I will call for a vote. Okay, so first a vote on the amendment to the motion. The original motion states that instead of the, I'm sorry, I clicked off the map. So the proposed subdivision has a 20-foot easement off, 10-foot, what am I looking at? I'm looking at it wrong. 20-foot easement off the front of Easy Street before the building envelope. So the motion is to keep that 20-foot easement as an amendment to the original motion, which is to reset it to the 25-foot as minimum as specified under the land use code. So a call for the vote on the amendment to the motion to send a positive motion on 20 feet instead of 25 feet. So all in favor, raise your hand.
And no from O'Brien.
Okay, so Emily and Kevin vote yes towards the amendment to the motion. All opposed to the amendment to the motion? Okay.
Nope.
Got you.
Good.
So Brian, Garish, Rachel, and Bob O'Brien vote no to the amendment. So the amendment to the motion fails. So we'll now vote on the original motion on the table, which is the first of two in our packet, which I have lost again in Acrobat. Please bear with me. I got it. Thanks, Garish.
Okay.
So Garish's motion is to send a favorable recommendation to approve the Strawberry PUD and associated master plan for the parcel at 4057 South Chapman Lane, All American Acres, Lot 7. All in favor of this motion, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Brian, Emily, Garish, Rachel, Kevin, and Bob all voted aye, none opposed. So there is a second motion in our packet, potentially, if somebody wants to make it to approve the preliminary plat. Is there anybody who would like to make that motion? Garish.
I will make it. And I probably should have held my previous amended motion or my previous motion, the part about the setback to this section, but I move to approve the Strawberry PUD preliminary plat for 4057 South Chapman Lane, subject to the condition of approval of the PUD by the county council.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Rachel. Is there any discussion? Garish, do you have any comment? Okay, any comment or discussion by members of the commission?
This is actually going back to the previous one. I finally got the calipers working, and a lot of nearby houses range between, I would say, 53 to 50, pretty common is 58 feet from the center line of the road. So I don't know what the setback from the road is, and so maybe Mila, if you've got a 25-foot setback, what does that translate to in terms of distance from the center line of the road?
I'm gonna have to look on the plat.
I think 33 feet is a common right of way.
Yes, the right of way of the road dedication is 66 feet and the pavement is 24. So that gives us 42, well, no, so 12. Yeah, it's about 25 or so, 30 feet from the middle.
So if I understood you correctly, then it seems like most of the houses nearby are right at the 25-foot limit. So they got as close as they could.
Well, so that's about 35 feet from the center line to the proposed lot line, and then the applicant is proposing another 20 feet back from that.
Yeah,
So that would be about 55 feet or so from the center line of the road.
I don't want to spend too long on this, but so from the center line of the road, first we go 33 feet, which is half of 66. and then we go another 25, which would be 58 feet.
That's right.
And in reality, the houses that there are all right around 58 feet from the road. So previously, people were asking how far they're set back, and the answer is 25 feet plus the road right of way. So.
Brian, you're on mute. I see you trying to say something.
Unmute. Anyhow, I'm looking at it right now, and there's a couple houses, 3 houses right next, with probably about 30 feet or so from the setback from the lot line, and the rest of them are back 100 feet or so, and so it's kind of mixed. Just there's only three in the neighborhood, and the one on the corner also. So.
Okay. Kevin? You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Rachel?
Wait, can I just clarify, Kevin, you're saying that they are under they're under 20 feet?
No, so to summarize, the question was, what are the other existing houses? What are their setbacks? And I think many of them are about 25 feet, plus the road width. But there are a few, as Brian points out, that are further back. I think some of those are further back because they're on flag lots, but others, they go back. So it's a mix.
Okay, so it seems like none of them are under 25 feet. That's just what I wanted to clarify.
All right. Okay, if there is no further discussion on the second motion on the table, I will call for the vote. So final call, comments? Okay, so the motion on the table made by Garish and seconded by Rachel is to move to approve the Strawburb PUD preliminary plat for 4057 South Chapman, subject to the condition of approval of the PUD by the County Council. So all in favor of this motion, raise your hand and say aye. Or say aye. Okay, so Brian, Emily, Garish, Kevin, Rachel, and Bob all vote aye, none opposed. So it is unanimous. All right. So thank you to the applicant and to those who made comment this evening. Now, because this came up during this discussion, I also want to reference a note from Councilwoman Hawks in the chat stating the meeting and agenda are definitely on the county website. That may be an issue, at the very least, a learning experience for staff who have an overflowing plate, but it would be worth addressing it publicly in this meeting for the benefit of the citizen who raised the issue. So the meeting and agenda, go ahead, Jalen. Yes.
Sorry, excuse me, that are definitely not on the county website.
They are on the county website. Actually,
I went and looked and it wasn't there.
I just didn't hit publish. They're there now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's time.
I do know the citizen that had the concern. He usually goes on Friday afternoon, and so he was surprised there was nothing there. So
yeah,
anyway,
everything was posted on the state website, but the county website has one extra step that was not clicked on.
Okay, yeah, and I subscribed him to the state website.
So I just have a question about whether this is a legal public hearing if it wasn't properly noticed.
It was properly noticed. All of the noticing requirements were met. Those do not include posting the agenda on the county website. The noticing requirements are all of the state notice, which was posted, and the TI, the Times Independent, and the applicant mailed everybody, and the on-site notice was all done.
Okay, thank you. So it's not a requirement that the agenda be posted on the county website?
Not as part of the public notice requirements, no.
Thank you.
All right.
Public hearing, sorry.
Great, thank you. And certainly this is a trying time and plates are full and publish buttons are sometimes missed, and that is okay. We are all doing our best. But I do appreciate both of you double checking and also subscribing the commenter to the state website. Jalen, do you mind coming off mute and just sharing how people can find that on their own if it's something they're interested in, since it came up?
Yeah, it's really quite simple. I don't have, let's see, maybe I've still got the website up, but what I did was Googled public notice website, Utah, and it's one of the first things that comes up. And you can actually subscribe yourself with just your email and name. to just about every single, I would say every single public meeting, of course, that happens in the county. You pick your county, Grand County, and then which ones you want to subscribe to. And then it comes, the agenda comes directly to your email inbox. It's pretty slick.
Lovely. Thank you. Garish?
And I appreciate, that this was a legal public hearing. I just know that if the county were going to be contested in court, it's more easily to contest an action based on procedure than it is on the merits. So I appreciate that we procedurally were correct, even though we have a tradition of posting on the county website.
Thank you, Garish. All right. So as far as future considerations, I just want to play back a couple that came up earlier in the meeting just to make sure that they're captured. So putting page numbers on the digital copy of the agenda. Regarding the format of our meeting minutes, Rachel made the great suggestion of creating a standard template, whatever that is, the location of public comment, future considerations, any county council updates, and then for each agenda item, stating the agenda item, bullet points on the conversation, and then an outcome of the vote with timestamps to specific references from the conversation that can be referenced against the recorded meeting. And we also brought this up just as a request to staff over email that timestamp be relative to the starting time of the meeting. So you just have to check the clock as you're taking notes versus, or whichever is easiest for staff. But I don't think we have to have precise timestamps relative to the recording itself. Also that we defer to staff on the format that makes the most sense for meeting, noting that meetings are tricky, and that this is something that has come up with the county council, and trust staff to make decisions to capture our minutes in the way that best conforms to county precedent and county standards. And then the only other item that came up earlier, Garish, I see you, I just want to play back in my head, is that Kevin is going to take the lead on drafting this letter that was discussed earlier, that I will help him. We will try to get that out to planning commissioners over email, maybe midweek, late week for discussion, and ideally not require that it's something we bring up at our next planning commission meeting, but hopefully can draft and get signed and sent to council ahead of time. Even if we can get it ahead of their next meeting, that'd be great, but I don't know if that's feasible. So I know I just played back 3 items. Garish and Rachel, I saw you both have comments, and then Kevin, I saw your video. So Garish, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to say, rather than go through 2 citizens to be heard, maybe that could be one of the first action that or the first items when the 5 o'clock portion of the meeting starts. And then, this is the first time you've been acting as chair, Emily, but let's remember to do the ex parte communications and see if anybody has conflicts.
I did, but thank you for the reminder. But I do like the suggestion to move citizens to be heard at the top of the 5 o'clock hour if we do have public comment. I think that's a great suggestion. I can't imagine, since we just changed the time to 4, that might confuse people, but maybe for the next meeting, we'll just maintain the call at 4 and then reset to 5. And then for the meeting after that, we'll just go for 5 onward.
Yeah, but I really like a 4 o'clock start time. I think it gives us a good opportunity to talk about things before we get to whatever the meat of the meeting is. I think we've had some really good communication since we started this new schedule.
I agree. Rachel, I saw your
Yeah,
hand.
just one more thing for the agenda, and I think it might be good that what I was the least comfortable with when I was writing those 3 agendas was summarizing the citizens' comments. So I almost think just omit all that and just have citizen comments and a timestamp. And then I think the same could be said, in my opinion, for commissioners as well. And instead just doing bullet points, maybe not even assigning who said what, but just the bullet points or a quick summary of sort of the pros and cons or, you know, the reasoning for voting a certain way. That's my only comment.
Kevin, you're just stretching. Okay, Brian, Bob, I can't see you. Either of you have any items for future considerations? I'm trying to be mindful that Zoom is really hard to communicate on. I use it all day long and I still struggle. So.
No, for me, anyway.
Thank you. All right, Jaylene, County Council update.
There's the issue of the next Planning Commission meeting is Memorial Day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I feel like it's been a lifetime since that was brought up. My goodness, it's a Monday afternoon. Okay, so Mila, you mentioned specifically, or somebody had the comment about what else was on, what we think might be on the schedule, and if that can help us determine whether we need to reschedule or sufficient to skip or whatever staff's recommendation is. So Mila, if you wouldn't mind taking this one.
Sure. So right now we have one item that will almost definitely be on the agenda. And then I believe there's a possibility that we could have probably 2 more, potentially 3. It's hard to say. We don't have, the other 2 or 3 are not resubmitted to us, but we just had our DRT meeting last week and some of those applicants did not have very many comments to work on. So I would imagine that they will have that in there soon. And we do have an item that was pulled from the meeting today that would certainly be ready on the 25th. So it's up to you. I would, if it's possible, if it works, I think it would be best if we could just postpone the meeting to the next day, to Tuesday, the 26th. I think waiting another 2 weeks for some of these applicants would be unfortunate.
Does anyone have a concern with doing Tuesday? What is the date of that? I don't have a calendar in front of me.
26th, I believe.
26.
So
Yeah.
Tuesday, the 27th at 4 p.m. instead of Monday, the
26th.
Tuesday would be the 26th. Monday
Yes.
is the 25th. Thank you.
Yes.
So does anyone have any concern with doing Tuesday, the 26th for a 4 p.m. start, 5 p.m. public hearing in delay of the meeting the day before that would fall on Memorial Day?
I don't have a concern at all about doing that, but I probably have a conflict and I'll be out of town.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Garish, that was not a concern in general, but you just won't be available for that meeting.
In all probability, I won't be here for that meeting and I won't be able to call in.
Okay. Any other concerns with moving to Tuesday? I know we all have very pressing travel schedules these days. Garish, I'm sort of jealous. All right. So I think that's great. You know, Mila, if you wouldn't mind just putting that in an email, just so that if, you know, people get off this call and check their schedules and just realize there's something else that came up. Otherwise, let's plan on just moving that ahead a day.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know what date we have to post. It's so as far as posting to the public, you know, since we're changing dates, especially using like digital channels, I know that it's not required, but maybe we could post ahead of time or post more than once or share on social media that this change is happening, just so that there's no confusion for people who might want to attend. That'd be great.
Sure. I'll definitely take care of that as soon as I get confirmation from the planning commissioners that that's what we want to do.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Cool. All right. So Jaylene, if you wouldn't mind with your update.
I can make mine very short because County Council canceled their meeting last week. So we have not met since this group met last.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
All right.
Out of curiosity, why was the meeting canceled?
What was that?
I was just curious why the meeting was canceled.
We had that emergency meeting the week before, and there weren't too many critical items on the regularly scheduled meeting of last week, so we moved everything to the emergency meeting the week before.
All right. Great. Well, so Kevin, if you wouldn't mind taking to, we can communicate over email and CC the commissioners as far as drafting that email. And I will entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Make the motion.
I second.
All right. All in favor? Done.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Great night.
Good night.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks all.